Hello and welcome back to the Experience Lounge podcast. We are here with a very exciting episode. This is a bonus episode, so don't expect the normal, very highbrow EX content that we produce. This is a special for two reasons. First of all, it's International Women's Day. It's Women's Day every day, but today is International Women's Day as recognised.
Indeed.
And the second is what, Laura?
It is our first birthday. Woo! Yeah. So we've been running the podcast for a year, which is super exciting. It's also my husband's birthday today, which isn't why we've got the banners up, because if you can see really closely on mine, it says 1. So their first birthday balloon banners, and he is not one.
Thank you for clarifying.
But it always makes me laugh as well that his birthday is International Women's Day. It's like my mother-in-law knew that we needed.
Absolutely.
We needed him. So yes, exciting though. I'm so excited.
I know.
Yay! I'm proud of us.
Got to a year. It's so exciting, and I think we've got a lot to celebrate. Hence the birthday banners. But before we get into one, the celebrations, and two, the important topic of International Women's Day, Laura, how have you been? Give us the updates. I feel like it's been a while.
I am good. Life updates in terms of house. I think I've talked a lot about that on the podcast. Still waiting for the solicitors to do their thing, although we're hoping it's going to be end of March, early April. And frankly, I think that can't come soon enough. I need my own space. I have set up, I haven't posted anything yet, so you can't find me there if I share it, but I have set up a home Instagram, which when I know the date is ready to go with all my home styling, inspo, interior design, newbie stuff. So yeah, I'm just waiting now. I'm hoping it's a few more weeks because it'll just be nice to have our own space, basically.
I bet. And okay, 2 questions. One, is it going to be a big reno? Like, are you replacing the kitchen or anything like that? And second of all, what kind of vibe are you going for? Like neutral, modern, farmhouse vibe?
So I would say medium renovations, because actually it's a sort of house where you could move in and it would be fine. But for our tastes, we want to knock through the kitchen, dining room, utility area, and we've got an orangery at the moment, which is, I think, just posh way to say a conservatory. But anyway,
a conservatory.
And knock all that through and make it into an open plan kitchen. So that's the biggest reno, and then a couple of bathrooms will definitely need the whole suites ripping out, because nobody likes a 1980s pink bathroom, which one of them is we've
I think
got.
They're kind of on trend at the moment.
They're coming back.
90s, yeah, they are.
Yeah, so interestingly, we've been doing a lot of Pinterest, obviously, and my husband was showing me some pictures, exactly that, where they had like pink sinks, like think 80s, 70s, 80s sinks, but like with nice kind of rose gold or sort of brass taps. And I could see it's a vibe, but yeah, we'll see. And then answer your question around decor, I like it modern, but I also do like a feature wall or a like dark contrast wall. So I think I'd want to do like, say, a living room with, a nice kind of dark green or dark blue as one wall, and then have the neutral colours. Luckily, in some rooms there's a lot of neutral, which I think is good, like greys and white, but then some really, really disgusting kitchen and hallway design choices. So we're talking lime green tiles that have been painted in a black and white kitchen. And the other big thing is, I think if you sort of muted all the walls, this would look fine, but they're Harlequin floors. So where like it's they're black and white diamonds, which is quite bold, right? So if you were going to do that, I think you'd make the walls neutral. No, lime green, and then this wallpaper that's like got velvet stuff on it. So I'm not describing it that well, because it's going to have to go pretty quickly. So there's some big sort of decor stuff that needs to be done quite quick. But when you say reno, it's not a doer-upper. Like it is something that that doesn't need heaps of work, and is for those that are maybe more familiar with the Northwest, it's a Cheshire red brick. So that's a style of of how it would look. So I'm excited.
Ooh.
But I've never done any kind of home stuff before, so that's going to be
Mm.
interesting.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the Instagram content and the updates. We'll drop the Instagram obviously when Laura announces it. I feel like
Obviously.
you've made a big deal out of it now. We're all going to be like, she's going
I
to drop
know.
the Instagram handle, and then we all have to rush and follow you. But no, this is so grown up. This is so grown up of you. You know that.
It is. I've rented for the best part of 15 years, so I'm ready. How about
Proud
you?
of you.
Anyway, enough about my house reno. Not people don't come to the podcast for that content. So how about you?
But still, bonus episode. We're just running with it. Yeah, all good. So I know over the last few weeks I've been harping on, and probably because we've pre-recorded episodes, we'll continue to harp on about prepping for this face-to-face workshop that unfortunately had to go virtual because Lady Rona is still around and. People are still super anxious about it. And actually, do you know what? Here in Singapore, case volumes are pretty high. Which is just not ideal. So yeah, we had to switch to a virtual workshop, which lasted 4 hours this week, which is a long time for a virtual workshop. So I was totally spent, honestly. And yeah, but it was fantastic. And we got to some really exciting EX initiatives for the year. So we kind of went through this process of, hopefully this is interesting for people. So kind of how we ran the workshop was a bit of ideation about EX as a concept and like, what does it mean to us as a company? Then we spent a bit of time looking at personas. So really basic persona profiling, but obviously that takes a little bit more work. And then we jumped into a bit around the experience journey. So like from start to finish, what are those key process interactions, technology, people? And then we got into an activity that I love to do, which I actually picked up from, I did my human-centered design thinking course with the Luma Institute. Did you do it with them as well? You were considering it? Or you did it?
No, yeah, I did.
So they have an amazing website called Luma Workplace that I still have my membership with. And there's a concept on there, and I think it's quite popular anyway, and just generally design thinking workshops called Rose Thorn Bud. Yeah, loved it. So we did that, and that really teed us up nicely to do the then how might we statements. And then we got into the prioritization matrix, which is kind of where we landed with like, what are we going to prioritize this year? So hopefully that's useful insight for anyone on the podcast looking to run a virtual workshop. So yeah, that's mostly been it. And my husband got back from Australia. He's traveled for the first time. That's amazing for him. So
how
I feel
was that?
Somewhat normal. It was good. I think he had a great time. It's totally normal there, a bit like I imagine London's, like people are in pubs, breathing all over each other, liberating. Yeah.
It is. It's like what Corona here, to be honest with you. Yeah. Which has its advantages and disadvantages, I suppose. But it does feel, here very much like we're back to normal life, as it were. So
yeah, I'm jealous. But yeah. Anyway, so that's my update. Let's jump into International Women's Day.
Yes. So the theme this year is break the bias. And for those that are watching on video, you might see on LinkedIn a lot of people doing this. That's the symbol for this year, for break the bias. But I also saw, because I was sort of doing a bit of Googling, and I guess it's linked to break the bias, but the theme for International Women's Day on the UN website was a take on that, because it was gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. And the sort of, I think, overall thinking for break the bias is we want to get to a world free of bias, of stereotypes, of discrimination, and a world that feels diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and together we can kind of forge that for women's equality. So it's a great movement. It's something I think every year that we really get behind. And we did want to talk, I think we said it would be a bit more of an informal episode this time, but we did want to talk a little bit about when we think about gender diversity and equity and inclusion, what does that mean from an EX practitioner perspective, and how can EX practitioners lean in, and what might organizations need to think about? So what, I guess maybe to start, Sasha, what have you seen has sort of worked or kind of been important from an EX perspective when we think of gender diversity, equity and inclusion?
So I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, right? I'll start with one that I think is kind of topical given the year and the situation. We've already spoken about Lady Rona. I think this year more than ever, we're living the fallout of COVID, in terms of people leaving the workforce, people feeling the strain of managing childcare responsibilities, lifestyle changes, location changes, financial struggles. And I think that, as with all of the research, which again we'll always share in the description, it it directly impacts women, and disproportionately so.
Yes.
And so I think from an EX perspective, it's for us to kind of step into the fold to say, okay, how do we maybe relook at some of the key processes and journeys within our organization to ensure that we're doing what we can to retain our women talent, and to make sure that, people feel like joining us, and that it's a place in which women can thrive regardless of, their situation, or we can support them through their personal situation. So I think, the EX function, EX design teams, we play a role directly in doing that. And I also think, if it's almost a call to action a bit right here. So when we were thinking about the episode, when we were prepping for the episode, I was kind of thinking, maybe that's part of the strategy for EX teams this year, is doing a campaign around reevaluating key processes to make sure that they are inclusive. And, maybe using International Women's Day as kind of the kickstart to say, okay, we're going to pick our top processes and revisit them, because so much has changed as well with hybrid working, right? So
definitely.
As much as we might think, yes, our return to work process that we embedded 3 years ago works really well, have we revisited it from a hybrid working perspective? Have we refreshed our personas to see, is there a difference with women in our organization? So I think that's the first thing I want to say, but I feel like I could ramble. So I'm going to pause there and throw it to you. What do you think?
So the big one that's front of mind for me was linked to what you said about kind of relooking at your processes or journeys or kind of key moments, and doing that from a measurement lens. So I think if you can evolve your sort of employee experience measurement so that you can specifically look at experiences that may have a tendency to drive inequality and have clear data around how you would measure that, I think that's a really tangible way, again, that EX practitioners, HR professionals can lean in and actually take that data to the business and say, the data is telling us that the way in which whether it's female employees or it's employees that might be from different ethnic backgrounds, whatever the sort of the kind of minority group is, that you're able to share that data and show where is it in that experience that actually it is creating a disparity, and then what is it as an organization that we might need to do about that. So for me, I think all of the sort of previous conversations we've had around EX measurement, but I think that's really, really crucial, and sort of using that with your business leaders, the sort of question about, why should we care about this? Because you can then see the real tangible impact that has, and it will lead then to other metrics around, your talent development of women, your retention of women, all of that sort of stuff, I think is linked. So that was one today, just actually some other conversations I've had in earlier calls that I've had today. That was something that we were actually talking about. So it feels very relevant for this conversation, I think.
Front of mind. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It also, and I think we mentioned this around the Great Resignation, it's kind of getting that sense of urgency going, right? And you're absolutely right, digging into the data and saying, okay, are we seeing trends across our women population, whatever it might look like. I think that's really, really powerful. I think as well, and I've kind of already touched on this, if I look across over the last few years, kind of how I've seen women's support programs or, training internally, and, looking even at how onboarding experiences are designed, or, whatever other process it is, the times have changed so much, and what is and isn't deemed acceptable anymore has shifted. And so I also think this year, with everything that's gone on and all of the recent events, and even just looking at the language and the rhetoric online around International Women's Day, organizations have to look at what they do and refresh it to be relevant for now. You know, I saw a post today on LinkedIn around women's leadership programs. Are they still relevant? Is it okay for us to have that? And like, and you know, I'm in the camp of no. I think there's a benefit to having like a women's leadership community, but you know, kind of separating a leadership program for women to me seems a bit archaic. Like that was very relevant 10 years ago, but I don't necessarily think that's the case now. So it's that kind of thing. Like, have we brought our experiences up to 2022? Like, are they relevant for, let's say, millennials or Gen Z joining the organization? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think there's also, I think there needs to be more emphasis when we think of how do we break the bias around what are the enablers. So if you look at a lot of the research externally, so you mentioned at the start of the conversation that women in the pandemic have been disproportionately impacted. And that is often because, not all women, but often because a lot of women may, you know, sort of bear the main childcare responsibilities or sort of, you know, running the household type responsibilities alongside working as well. And for me, organizations need to think about what are some of the enablers that then help to create that more inclusive and diverse environment. And so that is something like we've talked a lot about in this season around your flexi hybrid working. But again, if you sort of look at your employee listening, a lot of the data from a lot of employees is that it's often women that do want that flexibility. But then we also need to be mindful of, if we are going to have more women perhaps working from home, that they're then not disadvantaged because they're not seen from a, if you're not on the video, I'm doing inverted commas, but they're not sort of physically seen when you then think of promotion opportunities. So for me, I do think it's organizations taking a step back and saying, what are the things that enable women to thrive, that create opportunities, and sort of from an EX lens, using the data that you would get and that sort of human-centered design, so bringing that female voice in to then say, actually, the policies and sort of processes that we're designing have that lens in mind, and they really do enable that inclusivity. And then the other big thing, which I think is often the mistake when you were sort of saying about separating women for their leadership program or separating women for their mentoring, actually we need men as allies. And so I think there needs to be more of a discussion around that allyship for and how we can collectively support the participation and sort of lifting that participation of women, I think.
100% agree. 100% agree. And, you know, this is quite a chatty episode, right? So, you know, to share a personal reflection over the last year for me has been incredibly hard because, you know, I've shared this on the podcast before. You know, my partner and I've been trying for children. We've faced some loss, we've faced struggle, and, you know, working, it's been overwhelming with everything that's going on, right, as well. But also working from home has allowed me, or has afforded me, the flexibility to go through fertility treatment and still be able to do my job, right? So and it's considerations like that and angles like that, from, you know, supporting women in the workplace who are maybe transitioning into that family parenthood phase of their life, that season of their life, that hybrid working has allowed me to do that without having to take loads of time out of work. And I am probably one of many women that have benefited from that. And of course, there are some costs there as well. You know, you feel a bit isolated and everything, but it's that kind of consideration of like, how has the last year, 2 years, the move towards hybrid working from home, you know, looking and refreshing our processes with that diverse angle. You know, it does benefit some people, and for those big key moments, it's really beneficial. So I think it leads me on to another point I wanted to raise, which was, as EX practitioners and EX designers, it's our responsibility, or it's our opportunity even, to challenge the bias, right? So within that
Yeah.
theme during the design process, right? So, you know, we have to make sure, and we've spoken about this on the podcast before, we're representing diverse personas, we're bringing different perspectives into the design process.
Yeah, exactly.
And lead kind of connecting that to my previous remark, I wonder how many employees have been represented in the room when future of work and hybrid working strategies have been devised. You know, have we taken into account all of the different perspectives, or at least a range of different perspectives when we've been deciding that? Or has it always been about, we need people back in the office because it's part of our culture, you know? So I think that's on us as well as an EX team to drive that conversation. It's healthy, and to kind of bring in real examples of what it's like to work for a company, you know?
Yeah. And I think a build on some of our episodes from last year, where we talked about the importance of organizations thinking about the policies or the leave types. And I go back to that as being my point around how you enable. And that is, again, building on what you've said around bringing the voice and different perspectives. So, you know, we talked before about miscarriage leave. We've talked about like, I've seen organizations now looking at menopause and sort of, are we offering different types of policies and leave around that.
Yeah.
I even saw I think very recently on LinkedIn, there was, I can't remember which organization it was, but they were going to offer one paid leave day a month that was basically your sort of menstruation leave. So if you have, which I think, you know, not to sort of overshare on the podcast, but lots of women have sort of woken up and gone, you know, my cramps are really painful, and actually it's really difficult to be able to think straight. I just want to lie in bed and sort of rest and take care of myself. And I think the more forward organizations that are thinking about, actually there isn't a one size fits all in terms of employee needs. And I think that's at the essence of employee experience, right? Is it's about trying to understand those different employee voices, those different employee needs, and bringing that in through, you know, whether it's your sort of persona building, your journey mapping, that you've got that kind of insight in, and you're then creating experiences and policies that support and empower women to then have an equal playing field, because actually some of the circumstances or things that they go through in their life are different to men. It's just fact, like, you know, biologically, you know,
100%, totally different. Like, I and again, touching on this point before, and props to all the women listening to this podcast that go through this. Like, last year has been completely eye-opening for me. Women have to bear the brunt of fertility treatments. That it can't, like, you know, my husband can't do that for me. And so, you know, I almost feel bad for him in a way, because, you know, there is no choice. I have to do this. You know, I have to be the one that, you know, injects between calls, or, you know, factors my appointments into my diary because I have to be there, and, you know, all of those things. So, you know, women do bear the brunt of a lot of those things that just frankly, you know, aren't shared. It is very unique to women.
Yeah. And I think I saw something, I think I even sent it to you this morning, but it's then also women bearing the brunt of that are then going to be raising with men, but raising the next generation and giving birth to the next generation of people that will move into organizations and into the workforce. So yeah, I think there's a real, and I would say maybe in the last, I don't know, 5 or so years, it feels like there maybe is more of a shift into acknowledging actually there are some real differences and things that women go through that are different to men. And I think the more forward thinking organizations are starting to, as we've said, develop policies. But for me, it should be that these are standard, in the same way that you get an annual leave entitlement. Some of these policies then become just how we do things around here, because I think that's true empowerment and trying to level set the playing field. There was one thing I was thinking as we were sort of talking through. I think from what we've described is a lot in the context of perhaps those that maybe work more in a large or sort of medium-sized organization with that infrastructure around policy. So what would your view be around how do we drive that sort of gender equality, where it might not sort of have the same kind of ecosystem, if you like, in a sort of large organization, or you might be working in in a different sort of industry that, might mean you don't have access to the same kind of opportunities, I suppose.
Yeah. It's a really good question. And actually, I think I could be wrong, but I think it's something like 90+% of the working population work for small businesses, right? So
Yeah.
businesses that won't have an EX function, right? And so I don't know, it's a really complex question, but the first thing that kind of springs to mind for me is flexibility. And I think in the absence of being able to offer people amazing programs and, all the enhanced policy benefits in the world, I think flexibility and trust is just something that can really make a difference, especially to women, right? Especially to women that, as we said, period leave, those kind of things. Like, you don't necessarily need a period leave policy to support women in your organization, especially if you're a small organization. But a trusting culture and flexibility will actually cover a multitude of reasons why your minority or more diverse employees might need support. And I think that's something that's kind of my go-to. And then, of course, the second being leaning on the resources that have been published and shared by those larger organizations, right? There are so many amazing, even like International Women's Day campaign. I know from a pregnancy and fertility support perspective, Tommy's, they produce a bunch of free resources for organizations. Government organizations do the same thing. So I think, leverage those resources as well. If you're a small organization, you don't have to start the thinking from kind of ground zero. Like, it's there for you to take.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Definitely. No, I do. I think there is lots out there that you can leverage. Like, even like you say, when I was sort of doing a bit of research for today's episode, there is content on the International Women's Day website. There's lots that you would be able to kind of access and then think, actually, we can kind of shape this to sort of help smaller organizations. I think perhaps those that, like we say, we talk a lot about us going out and doing our personas and journey mapping, and conscious that not everybody has that size of organization. But actually, I think what it comes down to is still listening. And I think that whatever the size of your organization or whatever industry you're in, you can still get that employee voice heard. And I think that's the key thing. And again, sort of looking for where would be your sponsors and your allies is the key thing for me. Because I think until you have that, it's going to be a real struggle, really, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
So what would be your one commitment, thinking about the Break the Bias campaign this year?
What would be my one commitment? And obviously this is top of mind, right? But something that has been a revelation for me over the last year. This year, I want to do more with my clients to champion the impact of family life / fertility, infertility, that journey, and the impact that has on a relatively significant size of your employee population. So not just women, but also men. And I think if we can kind of break the stigma around going through that in isolation and provide more support programs to employees, more flexibility, more financial support if we can, I think it will make all the difference. So that is 100% my commitment this year, is I want to do more to bring that to the forefront of the EX conversation. What about you?
So mine is, and I sort of reflected on this because I see this in my role as a people leader, as a senior leader in my organization, and kind of then as an EX practitioner. So I'm kind of looking at it from all of that lens. But for me, what I want to try and do is try and bring that data to help shape the conversation, because I think that is something concrete, that where you can bring some of that data to have discussions with business leaders, they can then see the real tangible benefit in terms of why we might need to do things differently. And that, I think, is where you can then look for your ways in which you can talk about how do we get better representation in senior roles. But I think leading with the data, for me particularly, I think with with business leaders is going to be is sort of going to be the key thing for me this year, I think, because I think that is the hook. And then I guess maybe this is a second thing or linked is also showcasing stories, because I think it's really powerful. And we've like you sharing your story over the last year is powerful. And we had, didn't we? We had loads of really, really nice feedback on that, and sort of how brave you were. But I think we need to showcase more stories in organizations of what it actually means for women going through different circumstances. And my commitment is to share my personal stories, which actually I think generally I'm quite good at. I think my team would say that I am like quite open with that sort of thing, but share it more broadly and not be afraid to share what that feels like and that impact. So maybe I did two then, but
that was two, but they're linked. They're linked.
Yeah, they're my commitments this year.
Oh, those are nice ones. Those are good ones, I think. So, yeah. And everyone listening, I think we're getting to the end of the episode. Let us know what your commitment is as well, especially if you're in the EX space. And if you don't have a commitment, would definitely challenge you to think about how you can make a difference this year. And, it doesn't need to be super broad. It doesn't need to be super narrow, but just something you're committing to, I think would be really, really healthy. And we'll come back next year for another International Women's Day and another year of the podcast, which leads me on to a question for you, Laura.
Yes.
Highlight of the year of being a podcaster.
Oh, do you know what sprang to mind straight away?
Go on.
And we do have to share this at some point, is just it's been a lot of fun in terms of the outtakes and stuff. So we did say at some point we will pull together the outtakes. So for me, I would sum it up to say it's been really fun, but actually the bigger point is I feel like we've created a platform and we're only just getting started to amplify our voices, but other voices around us that maybe don't always get heard. And I think that was, if I go back to what was the reason why we set up the podcast, it was about two things. I think it was more diversity of thinking in the EX and sort of HR space, particularly on the podcasting platforms, and then it was also to amplify voices that aren't always heard. And I feel like we've done that. It's been challenging on the way. We both work demanding jobs full time. We don't have a big production team, and I would say a massive kudos to you, Sasha, and thank you because you do all the editing, and it's no mean feat. And so I did want to say a massive thank you from me to you for that. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and actually I'm excited. I feel like we've got into a good rhythm. We're getting lots of people message us now and say, actually, I really like the podcast. I like your style, and so I'm really proud, actually, and that's a really nice way to feel, especially on a day like today, I think. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm so proud of us. I think you're right. If we look back at why we started this journey, we wanted to bring more diverse perspectives to the EX space.
Yeah,
we have some way to go, and I think for anyone listening out there, I think it's just generally an industry issue as well. Like, we need to get more women. Like, it needs to be less male, pale and stale. Sorry, I'm going to say it. So, that's what we came to do. That's what we're going to continue driving. So, I'm really proud of us. But what else have I enjoyed? Yeah, love the outtakes. I've loved the guests we've had on, right? So we've built some really good relationships with all of the amazing guests that we've had on. We've met some incredible people from all over the world. And that's what I've loved the most, is just building those connections and getting to know people as well. I think it's super, super exciting. And we've got so many amazing guests lined up as well for over the next few episodes. We're going to be exploring the metaverse, more on EX measurement. We've just got so much exciting content coming. So yeah, so proud of us. Yay for us. Woo!
I know. And also I read this online, actually on Instagram the other day. It was somebody else that had set a podcast, and theirs is much bigger than ours in the sense of they've got millions of listeners, and I'm sure they're making tons of money from it. We haven't got those yet. But one of the things that they said, which resonated with me, is we wanted to do something, we saw an opportunity and we went for it. And I think that would be my advice or sort of mantra to anybody. Just go for it, because we did.
100%.
And we're here a year later, and like we said, have loads more planned. So I'm excited.
Yay. I love it. So happy International
do.
Women's Day to all
Women's
of you.
Day,
Happy
yes.
birthday to us. I've prepared a song. No, I'm joking. I haven't. I did think about singing happy birthday, but I wasn't going to do that. And I was going to prank you actually by lighting a candle, putting it in a cake, and then holding it up and asking you if you want to blow it out to see if you would actually do it, because
I probably would.
that would have been, I know you would have. Yeah, it would have been hilarious. But no, don't have a birthday cake, but feel free to send us cake. That's absolutely fine if you're an avid listener. But anyway, happy International Women's Day. Have a great week. Have a great year. And thanks so much for being amazing listeners. We wouldn't be here without you. So love you guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.